Thousands of years ago, humans and monsters lived together in harmony, but due to man's greed this bond was broken. Mankind wanted to monopolize the planet, so they started a war and the monsters were exiled to the mountains. Since then, these creatures have never been able to cross the border between the worlds, until now. Many years have passed and the monster world is about to collapse. The old Monster King has been killed, and to protect his reign, the new Monster King has massacred all those who were loyal to the old kingdom. However, the former queen managed to escape and must now flee to the human world under the protection of some servants who also managed to survive the attack. She is pregnant with a baby that, according to the prophecy, will completely change the world of humans and monsters. During the escape through the forest, one of the new king's minions encounters the queen and her servants, who end up being killed while trying to protect her. Just as the creature was about to be exterminated, two new monsters appear. They give that monster a good beating and try to escape with the queen. She is badly hurt, however, and on the way, the new king's lackey catches up with them. Gao bravely jumps onto the animal's neck and lands several blows on it, but the monster manages to hold him back and would soon crush him. However, Gao's wife Ying uses her body to fire a cannon shot at the thing and manages to knock it down. Together, the three little monsters set off toward the human world. Tianyan Song is a boy with a limp who lives in a village located near the mountains. His father was a monster hunter and had gone on a mission when Tianyan was still small, leaving the villagers in his care. When he arrives at his tent, his grandmother is there, waiting to attack him. The old lady had some memory lapses and often could not remember that Tianyan was her grandson. She attacks the boy as soon as he enters the house, but since he is used to being received this way, he grabs a bucket and manages to stop the sword. The old lady always finds a way to diminish Song and says that the young man is a disgrace to the family because, unlike his father, the boy can barely do the fighting moves of the Song family. On that day, the woman informs him that she will go out to look for Tianyan's father. Ever since the man disappeared, from time to time, she would go out into the world to look for him. Later, while resting on the banks of the lake, the boy spots a couple walking through the forest. The woman approaches him and strangely compliments his smell. She asks if there is a restaurant nearby and Tianyan says that his restaurant is close. The man tries to dissuade her from going to the restaurant, but the woman says she needs to eat and they both decide to accompany the young man there. Among the trees, a woman named Xiaolan watches Tianyan being followed by those two outsiders. A few minutes later, she arrives at the restaurant and starts a heated fight with that mysterious woman. With the aid of her whip, Xiaolan manages to knock her down. She then stabs the man who was accompanying her. That girl was a level 2 hunter and intended to capture those monsters to be promoted to the 3rd level. While the battle is going on, Tianyan hides in the pantry. After being caught, the monster couple shed their human skin and reveal their true identity. Those were Gao and Ying. They carried the monster queen with them in the basket. However, after an attack by Xiaolan, the queen was eventually discovered. She is thrown into the pantry, where she has her first contact with Tianyan. The monster couple continues their fight against the girl, but during the battle they end up being captured by Luo Gang. Tianyan appears soon after with the monster queen behind him. However, the man also tries to capture her. The queen is startled and runs away, but before she leaves she throws saliva in the face of the boy she had just met. Xiaolan asks Luo Gang to return the monsters he had captured, since she was the one who was fighting them. However, the trickster man flees, leaving the girl behind with empty hands. Tianyan approaches the young woman with a wooden stool in his hands. He is suspicious of the girl and wanted an explanation of what had happened. Xiaolan explains that those were monsters covered with human skin. She tells that if she had not arrived at the restaurant in time, those creatures would have devoured the boy. Later, after dinner, the young people get ready for bed. Xiaolan remembers that before she ran away, the monster queen spat on Tianyan. This is a strategy used by monsters to locate people. The girl knew that the queen would contact the boy again, so she decides to keep him close. Her plan was to capture the little monster as soon as she returned and then collect her reward. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Luo Gang waited for the night to pass before making his way with the monsters he had captured. They were chained together and begin to sing a melancholy song, along with the other little monsters in the forest. Together, they put on a real musical show to distract the man so that Gao can steal the key to his coat and free himself from the chains. In this way, together with Ying, they manage to get rid of that hunter and set off in search of the queen. Before going to sleep, Xiaolan ties up Tianyan so that he cannot escape. However, her efforts are in vain. During that night, the monster queen manages to get to the room from underground. She cuts through the wood below the boy and takes him outside. When she is able to be alone with him, the queen tells him that she is dying and asks Tianyan to save her baby. Next, she does something extremely disgusting. The monster cuts open her own belly and pulls out an embryo, which she stuffs into the young man's mouth. By doing so, Tianyan's belly immediately grows. Just then, the monster that was chasing the queen in the forest appears again and is there to kill the future king. However, the monster attacks him. Her last mission is to protect the boy so that her son can survive. But within seconds, the queen is defeated. The creature is a few steps away from devouring them, but Xiaolan appears and hits the beast in the face with a kick. She then uses some freeze seals to immobilize that beast. This trick doesn't last long and soon after he manages to break free. The monster queen breaks the ropes that bound Tianyan. As her last wish, she asks him to protect her baby and then dies. By this time, the monster had managed to capture Xiaolan and Tianyan must help her. Seeing that the young man was carrying the future king of the monsters, the creature throws the girl away and goes after him. The boy tries to run, but because of his leg problem and sudden pregnancy, he can barely move properly. However, to his luck, Xiaolan stands up and stabs the beast in the back, opening a gap so that they could escape. When they return to the tent, the girl ends up getting caught in one of the traps planted by Tianyan's grandmother. While out looking for help, he realizes that his village is very quiet. The boy heads to the hut of his best friend Xiao Wu. He says that strange people have come to the village and taken all the villagers. Tianyan then asks his friend to let him in, and at this moment something he had never imagined happens. He discovers that Xiao Wu and all the other residents of his village were actually monsters. The green monster asks Tianyan to help them, for his father had promised he would save them. However, the boy is startled and runs in despair. He could not believe that this monster was his friend. While hiding, he sees a hunter capturing Xiao Wu and does absolutely nothing to save him. Instead, the boy goes in search of the other villagers. When he finds them, he sees that they are all about to be captured and sold. Aunt Mo, one of the villagers, says that they have done nothing wrong. In that village, all monsters were vegetarians, which proves that Mr. Song, Tianyan's father, was right in believing that monsters and humans could live together. Qianhu, the leader of the monster hunting agency, promises to leave the village alone if the villagers would turn him over to the monster queen. However, they refuse to act like traitors, and Qianhu uses a fire beetle to pierce the skull of one of those monsters. He then burns down the village and takes all the villagers as prisoners. The next morning, Xiaolan asks Tianyan to go with her to the nearest town and sell the little monster he is carrying. At first he refuses, but since he has nowhere else to go, he decides to follow the girl. While stopping for food in the neighboring village, the young woman spots Luogang and goes after him to ask about the monsters he had stolen. The man says that they have managed to escape and tries to convince Xiaolan to join him in a hunt for the queen. The hunter knew that the little monster was pregnant and her baby was worth a lot of money. However, she refuses to help him and goes after Tianyan so that they can leave that village. But Luogang follows her and discovers that the boy was with the baby monster. He tries to capture him, but Xiaolan enters the fray and manages to stop him. Suddenly, the monster that was chasing the queen appears and attacks the hunter. The girl tries to defeat it, but is also thrown away. Seeing that Tianyan was about to be crushed, Luogang stood up and attacked the creature. After all, if that young man died, he would not be able to sell the future king that was in his belly. At that point, the couple takes the opportunity to run away and leave the man to deal with that monster on his own. Luckily, Luogang is a level 4 hunter, and after a few minutes in battle he manages to defeat the creature, even though he is quite injured. In the next village, they decide to stop and rest. During dinner, Xiaolan meets a woman named Yingying. She and her husband were in town in search of treatment so they could have children. Gao and Ying, the monster couple, were also there, and while Xiaolan was having dinner in the restaurant, they go to the room to try to retrieve the baby monster. They strike Tianyan and leave him unconscious, that way the couple could transport him with ease. What they didn't count on is that the girl would soon return to the room and use her special seals to immobilize them. After trapping the monsters in the closet, she wakes the boy, who soon begins to have contractions. At that moment, he realizes that he is about to give birth, and Xiaolan tries to help him. She takes a pair of scissors and hot water, but as she prepares to perform the cesarean section, Yingying appears at the door along with her husband and the son of the owner of that hotel. She realizes that someone is having a baby inside and enters the room to help. However, before she could start the birth, she sees the baby coming out of Tianyan's mouth. Xiaolan realizes what has happened and hits the woman. When she wakes up, her husband is by her side and the girl tries to convince her that it was all just a bad dream. While they were talking, Nianyu enters the room and starts playing with the baby monster. They run across the room until they reach the roof. Tianyan chases after them and after a few minutes manages to catch the boy. He gives the boy back to the couple and throws himself on the floor from exhaustion. After all, the boy had just given birth. The next morning, the trio leaves for the next village. On the way, they decide to stop and rest in a cave, and Tianyan notices that the little monster has a fever. Xiaolan asks the boy to get a wet towel and begins to treat him. Sometime later, he manages to get rid of the fever, but he is still very weak, because he has not fed since he was born. The next morning, they find the horses fallen and their necks had bite marks on them. That baby monster has finally managed to feed himself, and blood is his favorite dish. Tianyan asks the kid not to drink any more blood and offers him some seeds. Apparently, the baby radish was enjoying the vegetables, but when least expected, it spits out all the seeds, forming a powerful machine gun capable of bringing down the wooden tent. After a few days of traveling, they finally arrive in the business city and Xiaolan goes directly to the pawn store to sell the baby monster. Tianyan tries to make her give up that idea, but the girl is determined to get her hands on that money. She kicks him into the cage and, after taking the money, leaves. The baby tries to keep up, but ends up being electrocuted when he touches the cage. With great regret, Tianyan leaves him behind and walks away. During lunch, he sees several families with their children in the restaurant and deeply regrets having sold the baby radish. Xiaolan also regrets her choice and decides to return to the store to rescue him. They play mahjong with pawn and the deal was that the winner would get the little monster. Tianyan wins the match and the woman informs them that the little creature had already been sold to the Paradise restaurant, where it would be served as a delicacy. There, the head cook was already preparing to serve it to the customers. She asks the cooks to fry the poor thing, but the little radish does not suffer even a scratch as it is dipped into the hot oil. Instead, he revels as if he were in a bathtub. While swimming in the pot, he spills hot oil everywhere, causing severe burns to the cooks. Meanwhile, the guests were preparing for the banquet. Among them were Yingying and her husband and the monster couple, Gao and Ying. Luogang, the monster hunter, also shows up at the restaurant. A few minutes later, Tianyan and Xiaolan arrive at the place, but the metal monster guarding the door says that they need a password to unlock the entrance. However, the girl keeps beating the thing and soon the door opens for them. In the kitchen, the head chef kept looking for a way to kill that creature, but all her efforts are in vain. So she decides to serve him alive a few minutes before Tianyan and Xiaolan arrive in the kitchen. As soon as he enters the place, the young man finds a monster hanging by chains from the ceiling, which he believes to be Xiao Wu's body. However, Aunt Mo, who was trapped in a cage, informs the young man that his friend was in the kitchen, about to be killed. Tianyan runs there and frees his friend. But a hunter arrives soon after to destroy them. Xiaolan manages to hold him back for a while, but ultimately ends up being thrown away. At that moment, Tianyan attacks him and, with a double kick, manages to knock him down. The man gets up and uses a seal to control the flames of the wood stove. The flaming ashes begin to pursue Tianyan, but Xiaolan manages to remove the boy's seal and hurls it at the hunter, who ends up being burned by his own flames. At that moment, Tianyan takes the bunch of keys and frees Aunt Mo. Then he asks her to free the other villagers who were also trapped in that place. The baby radish was being carried into the dining room. Meanwhile, Ying and Gao climb down the elevator ropes to try to save him. Luogang goes after them and is determined to eliminate them. The couple gets into a hand-to-hand confrontation with the hunter and the three of them end up falling into the kitchen. The elevator ropes break and the man is about to be crushed, but the monsters decide to save him. Back in the kitchen, a new hunter appears and attacks Gao, but as an act of gratitude, Luogang decides to defend them and joins them in that battle. After a few minutes of fighting, the trio manages to trap the hunter in one of the cages. In the dining room, Qianhu orders the cook to give the little king wine to anesthetize him. He then intends to use the fire beetle to pierce his brain. It seems that this time the radish baby will have no escape. On the way to the dining room, Tianyan meets his grandmother, who hands the boy a sword that his father had left for him. She says that in order to sharpen it, it was necessary to use some kind of blood. Otherwise, it wouldn't even be good for cutting vegetables. Tianyan asks his grandmother to wait for him and, together with Xiaolan, continues his rescue mission. The fire beetle was about to pierce the little monster's skull, but the duo manages to get there in time. Xiaolan uses her powerful paper dolls to get the bug away from the baby and starts to attack the hunters, while Tianyan tries to release the little monster, who is very happy to see him. During the battle, the girl gets caught in a whirlpool made by one of Qinyu's servants. Just when all seemed lost, Tianyan's grandmother arrives in the room and everyone is terrified, believing her to be a level 10 monster hunter, the highest level anyone could reach. What they didn't know was that those coins belonged to her husband and Tianyan's father. But as soon as the battle begins, she is unmasked and is also caught in the whirlwind. Qianhu promises Tianyan that if he would deliver him the baby monster, he would free those two women. Otherwise, they would both be killed. However, the young man has the great idea of using that little creature as a machine gun. In this way, he manages to attract the attention of the hunters and set them free. As a result of the gunfire, Commander Chinu's skin is wounded and begins to tear, revealing his true identity. He turns into a giant monster and attacks all the humans in the room, including his former allies. Xiaolan uses her whip to try to restrain him, but is thrown away. Tianyan tries to help her, but is also attacked. His grandmother hands him his father's sword and the boy uses it to strike the monster, who throws the sword back into his chest. Xiaolan cries, believing that his beloved is dead. The baby approaches him and removes the sword that was embedded in his chest. However, his little hands are cut off and the Monster King's blood activates the true power of that sword. Tianyan picks up his weapon and sets out to do battle. His grandmother instructs him to use the Song family moves to ignite the flames of the sword. The boy uses his flaming weapon to cut the belly of that beast in half and thus succeeds in destroying it. After the battle, the grandmother hands Tianyan a hunter's coin, left as a gift from his father. The next ones, the boy would have to conquer alone. After handing him the coin, the old lady jumps out the window and sets off on her next adventure. A few hours later, the monster couple finally arrive at the dining room, but everything was a real mess and the little monster was no longer there. They then believe that the baby had already been devoured and fall into tears. Somewhere in the mountains, Tianyan bids farewell to his son. He asks the little boy to go on his way together with the old residents of his village. He gives the boy the name Upa and asks him not to let anyone else call him a radish, even though the boy looks like one. Although he really wants to keep the little monster, the boy knows that this would be very dangerous because people from all over the planet were after the baby king. He asks Upa to leave, but the little boy does not want to abandon his father. So Tianyan takes his sword and says that he doesn't want to see him anymore. The boy remembers that this is exactly what his father did the day he left the village. Sad and scared, the baby joins the other monsters and leaves for the mountains. That day, Tianyan and Xiaolan embark on a new adventure and promise themselves that from that moment on they will hunt only evil monsters.